and welcome back to Bookish Theories. In today's video, I would like to continue my analysis of the VCRs that were shown in the Speak Yourself Tour final concert in Seoul, focusing on the videos featuring Aram, Jimin, and V, and on how they connect with the Make It Right animation according to Carl Jung's Red Book. If you guys missed part 1, I highly recommend you go watch it before watching this video because it will help you understand more of what's going on. Now, let's begin with Aram and Jimin. In many respects, their VCR is strongly connected to the ones focused on Jin and Suga and J-Hope and Jungkook. In my previous video, I theorized that their VCRs were meant to represent synchronicity, which is the process of connecting the conscious and the unconscious in order to achieve balance. In Aram and Jimin's case, something similar is going on. We see them both in a house, but while Aram's scene is centered around trees that go through the roof, that is, projecting towards the outside, Jimin's ones are more focused on the inside. One is in the light and one is in the darkness. And when the shadow of the bird appears on the wall, that is, when the connection between the two of them is established, Jimin starts to dance while Aram looks at him through the sphere. Much like what happened with J-Hope and Jungkook, here the two of them are representing two parts of the same person. When the conscious and the unconscious are connected, something beautiful happens. There is harmony, balance. But then Jimin sits down and the shadow engulfs him. In the last scene of the VCR, we see him approaching a mattress and losing consciousness, which implies that the connection is lost because the shadow is repressed once again. Their VCR, together with V's, is arguably the most important one among the ones I've analyzed, because I think that in this scenario they represent the hero we were shown in the Make It Right animation. Now, I know what you're thinking, this seems like a giant reach, right? Well, let's take a look and see if I can change your mind. While I was researching Jung's Red Book, I came across the story of Telesphorus. Now, Telesphorus is the Greek god of convalescence and healing, and in Jung's book he is portrayed as a small, childlike man wearing a cape. Apparently, Jung was so attached to this figure that he carved his image on a stone and put it in his garden, and the Greek inscription that he put on it translates as follows: "Time is a child playing like a child." This is Telesphorus, who roams through the dark regions of this cosmos and glows like a star out of the depths. He points the way to the gates of the sun and to the land of dreams. Now, right off the bat, this sounds very familiar to me. Telesphorus is a young boy wearing a cape. He is the embodiment of time playing with time. He travels in the darkness, shines like a star, and leads people towards the sun and the land of dreams where they can be healed. This could be a very poetic description of what BTS does on a daily basis, and it certainly fits the imagery we were shown in Make It Right, as well as the Bangtan Universe time-traveling storyline. But what does it have to do with the VCR? Well, in order to understand that, we have to focus on the sphere Aram is holding. Judging by the way the video is shot, it seems like that when Namjoon is looking at it, he sees Jimin inside of it. This makes sense because in the Serendipity live performance, Jimin is in a bubble-looking sphere that he blows up from the inside to set himself free. To be honest, I've always thought that that was about it, meaning that it was a bubble. But what if I told you that the sphere is actually the sun and that the boys, and more specifically Jimin, is playing the role of Telesphorus in this scenario? After all, Serendipity is a song that's fundamentally about healing. In the music video, we see him in the cosmos, associated with yellow globes and wearing a blanket that looks like a cape. Plus, do you remember what I said about Jung carving the stone? Well, this is what the stone looks like. Doesn't it look familiar? If Jimin is Telesphorus and shines like a star, it makes sense for him to live in the sun because the sun is a star as well. In the inscription, Jung says that Telesphorus is the one who leads towards the gates of the sun. So in this context, it means that Jimin, and by association the other members, are leading you to them in order to be healed with their music. Isn't this awesome? This idea would also be confirmed by what Jung had to say about the sun itself. Now, in the Red Book, the sun is a very important symbol, because if on the one hand the brightness of the sun represents our consciousness, on the other he compared our journey through life to a trip to reach the sun. This is very similar to what I just said about the boys and Telesphorus. In this context, the light BTS represent is both the journey and the destination. Our goal is to reach the sun, to reach the hero, the symbol of us healing. But at the same time, this hero has been within ourselves all along. This is why in the VCR, Jimin represents the inner part of Namjoon and Namjoon can see him through the sun. Namjoon here represents the conscious part of ourselves. It's us going through life, and he uses the light of the sun to look inside of himself and see the heroic potential all of us have inside of ourselves, which is Jimin, the hero. Since Aram's role is heavily focused on the outer part of our identity, in this context he also represents extraversion. That is the personality trait focused on the external aspect of ourselves that in Jung's theories is symbolized by the Hermes-Apollo archetype. This is important because the opposite of extraversion, that is introversion, is in turn symbolized by Dionysus. Dionysus is a god whose worship gave access to the repressed aspects of our personality through alcohol and art. So it makes sense that a song titled after him closed persona in order to introduce the shadow, because as a god, Dionysus literally symbolizes the connection between the two. What's interesting here is that in turn, the Hermes-Apollo archetype is connected to the ego, which is the part of our personality that puts balance between the persona and the shadow. If I'm correct about all of this, then it's entirely possible that a song called Apollo or Hermes will close shadow just like Dionysus did with persona. But in order to get to that point, we first need to take care of the shadow, and as we'll see in a second, this process is quite dark and dangerous. The journey Jung mentions in the description of Telesphorus seems to confirm this as well. When Jung says that Telesphorus points to the gates of the sun and to the land of dreams, he's actually making a reference to the Odyssey, and specifically to the lines in which Hermes led the souls of the dead to the underworld. In turn, this is a reference to the process the worshippers of Telesphorus had to go through in order to heal themselves, which implied them going in an underground room which supposedly had healing properties. I'm telling you all of this because if the story BTS is telling us is indeed connected to Hermes and Telesphorus, this means that in order to be healed, we have to go through a dark phase, which is exactly what Map of the Soul Shadow is supposed to be. This is where V comes into play. Now, if Aram and Jimin represent us and the hero inside of us, logic says that we need a dragon. And I think that V fits the profile here, because at the end of the video we see his shadow projecting the shape of wings. As we'll see in a second, this is also connected to Blood, Sweat and Tears and Abraxas. But I also think that these visuals have to do with the dragon, because in the Red Book, the dragon is a symbol of the shadow. In contrast to the other VCRs, which in one way or another are all about the balance between different sides of ourselves, this video is all about the loss of this balance, which is why the clocks in his VCR are the only ones that don't point at 432, which is the number of harmony. At the beginning of his video there is both light and darkness, but V destroys the light, thus allowing the shadow to take over. What's interesting here is that if we see the light bulb as a representation of the sun, V destroying it implicitly confirms that he is playing the role of the dragon, because in Jung's Red Book it's a dragon who destroys the sun. According to Jung, this dragon was a man who is reborn as a dragon, and in the book he is called the Nameless One because he is lost and doesn't know himself. In the context of the BTS storyline, V is definitely the one who best embodies this description, because he kills his father in the story. V is not evil per se, but he does evil things because he is lost, and his VCR is the representation of him losing control once and for all. If we take a look at Blood, Sweat and Tears, that part of the storyline perfectly fits with what I'm saying. Blood, Sweat and Tears was heavily inspired by a book by Hermann Hesse called Damien, and in the video V played the role of Damien, who is also the representation of Abraxas, the agnostic god of good and evil. Despite in Damien Abraxas wasn't actually bad, Jung saw him in a very negative light, because Abraxas is a very old god, and according to him, when God grows old, it becomes a shadow. Do you see how all of this is connecting? Abraxas is a god that embodies the energy and identity of the world. But as time goes on, it gets distorted into something fundamentally negative, because he embodies the brightness of the sun, but also the void that engulfs him. Bear in mind, Abraxas here is portrayed as both part dragon and holding the sun. So he's both the hero and the dragon, the conscious and the unconscious, and because of that he's condemned to self-destruction. This is a very dark thought because Abraxas basically represents all of us, and his gradual descent into self-destruction is what happens when the shadow takes over. This is why it's important to achieve balance. In the Make It Right music video, the hero kills the dragon, but killing the dragon is impossible when it's inside of yourself, and that's why it takes over if you don't accept it as such. In the VCR, V is gradually descending into self-destruction. He destroys the sun, his path and destination, and the dragon is all that remains because without light, darkness prevails. What's interesting here is that by the end, the video gives us a happy ending of sorts. The clocks go back in time and the light bulb becomes whole again, thus implying that even if the shadow takes over, there's always the possibility to fix it. In the light of the storyline, this could imply that this plot will take a darker turn and that Jin will have to go back to fix it. Considering that in the VCRs, Aram and Jimin are strongly associated to the sun, moreover, it's also possible that the videos here are foreshadowing V hurting one of them in the story. To me, it looks like Jimin could be the best candidate. To know whether I'm right or wrong, however, we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please think about liking and subscribing. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!